TalkTV has had mixed coverage of the war in Gaza. Piers Morgan has hosted some of the best conversations around, though he doesn't always cover himself in glory. But some people on the station have been consistently ridiculous. One of them is James Whale. On Sunday, he was joined by former trade union official Steve Headley to discuss the situation.
Are you completely stupid, Steve? Are you completely nuts? I mean, you come in here dressed in a scarf with a...
It's a Palestinian scarf.
Do you actually really support the Palestinians?
Absolutely.
What about
Hamas? I defend the Palestinians' right to defend themselves.
Yeah.
Do you say Hamas it was a resistance?
Sorry, I believe the Israeli government are a fascist government. I believe the Israeli government are a terrorist government.
It's a democratic government, isn't it? It's a democracy.
Oh, so that's okay. So Hitler was elected, so he's democratic, is he?
This is not on. Well, you want to talk rubbish? Go and talk to the BBC or some other.
But what do you think about the Hamas?
What about free speech?
Was Hamas a legitimate action?
You're saying it, but I don't need to listen to
what I'm saying to you is that I condemn terrorism, whether it comes from Hamas or from the Israeli government.
Right, so it has come from Hamas, but not from Israel. That's a war, isn't it?
Of course it has.
Well, no, that's defending themselves, isn't it?
No, because it's an occupied people.
Well, it is now. It wasn't in 2005.
It can't be self-defense.
They're not occupied.
It wasn't in 2005.
They've been occupied since 1947 when they drove the Palestinians off their land.
You want to look at your history books. 2005, they all left.
1947 is when the Nakba happened. I've never met such ill-informed people in my life.
Quiet. I don't want you in here anymore, Steve, because you are supporting the enemies of this country.
So you're throwing me out, James, because you the defender of free speech, are throwing me out.
You've had free speech, but I don't have to allow you to carry on. You, the defender of free speech, are throwing me out. I am defending the freedom of this country.
This is not on. It's not on. I won't accept this. You disagree with me. This is not on. By the way, those people are being paid. James Whale is paid to do that. Could you believe it? Fair play in a way. Apparently, Mr. Whale is defending the freedom of this country. Well, if he is, then we're more screwed than I thought. And apparently, Palestine isn't occupied. Mr. Whale, they have no airports. They have no control over their border. Israel doesn't even recognize these as international borders. That's the problem. There is no sovereign Palestinian state. So of course it's occupied. What else could it be? And how is it protecting Britain by supporting Israel? I must have missed that memo. After all, at a recent settler conference in Jerusalem, attended by a third of the Israeli cabinet, a leading speaker said that the 2.5 million residents of Gaza could go to, guess where? England and Scotland. Her words. Lots of people on the right, particularly in the media, cheer those same people on, but then they whinge when the refugees come to Europe. It's almost like they're not very clever. Anyway, back to the video.
If we're at war, as we soon are going to be, you won't be
at war with the Palestinian children who you're murdering in their
thousands. Do you support the 7/7 bombers then? Because they did that for the Palestinians. Well, why not? They did that for the Palestinian people. Do you support the Borough Market stabbings?
Well, do you support 30,000 dead people, civilians?
Well, yeah, it's collateral damage. It's a legal war. It's the lowest amount of
women and children.
It's the lowest amount of collateral damage ever.
Genocide.
It's not genocide, is it? It's not genocide, is it? 25,000 people out of 2 million is not genocide.
Do you support the 7/7 attacks? I mean, where do you begin with these people? By the way, after watching that clip, I recommend maybe doing some Sudoku or a crossword just to try and get some brain cells back. I'm sorry to do that to you. Shouldn't take long, maybe 20 minutes. The 7/7 attacks were 19 years ago. They had nothing to do with what's happening in Palestine in 2024. And the point around the deaths is interesting. Apparently 25,000 people out of 2 million isn't that many. It's 2.5 million. He says 2 million. It's not that many. Really? It's more than 1% of the population in a few months. Let's say a few months from now, the death toll is 50,000. That's 2% of the population. Is that still too low? Sorry, guys, more children need to die for me to care. Sorry, guys, more ICUs need to not work so newborns can die. Then I'll care. Maybe when it's 10%, 15%. For context, 2% of the population in the UK is about 1.3 million people. Would these guys consider that a lot? Apparently not. And apparently saying that all of this is bad, 25,000 people dying is bad, thousands of children dying is bad, women not having painkillers while giving birth, while having cesareans is bad. Apparently if you say this, it's offensive to Jewish people. Why? I think saying that's offensive to Jewish people, by the way. Now, you can disagree if there's genocide in Gaza. I've said before, I think it meets that threshold. But an ICJ court says there are grounds to ask the question. But apparently that offends you. Really? And next up the conversation turned to the issue of Zionism.
Ash is Jewish, and what you're saying to him is totally offensive.
Jewish, but it's not genocide, is it?
You're not a Jew.
It's irrelevant anyway, but it's not genocide.
It's not about being Jewish, it's about being a Zionist.
What is a Zionist?
A Zionist.
Should the Jews not have a homeland?
No, it's
Why didn't the
Jews not have a homeland?
Why didn't they have one in Bavaria? It was the Germans that had the Holocaust, not the Palestinians.
Was Israel never the homeland of the Jews?
Not in occupied Palestine. No,
it was. I don't want him on the show.
That's why they find old Jewish texts from 3,000 years ago.
They occupied Palestine.
Don't want that either.
They occupied Palestine.
Most of them come from the Arab countries that were expelled.
They ransom ever since.
Most of them were expelled from the Arab countries, most of Israel.
No, that's not true.
55%.
Can you be quiet? Seriously, can you be quiet?
The Arab countries actually gave the Jews refuge when the Holocaust was happening. How about that?
They were on the Nazi side. You don't know your history.
You don't know your history.
I don't know what he says. I'm executive producer.
Are you arguing that the Nakba took place? The United Nations recognised that the Nakba took place.
You're talking rubbish.
The United Nations recognised that the Nakba took place.
I'm trying to kick him out. What do you want me to do?
Is
the UN? Is this the UN that were on the Hamas attack? Is this the UN that are totally bent and corrupt organisations? Do you mean that UN?
This is a TV station on a broadcast, right? It's not a YouTube show. If I behaved like that, by the way, I'd get a ticking off from Fox, from Gary, from everybody here at Navarro Media. What the hell has happened to Aaron? So unprofessional. This is a TV station regulated by Ofcom. And that line about the UN being totally bent and corrupt. Evidence, please. And by the way, who is this Ash guy next to James Whale? It's like the Chuckle Brothers minus the professionalism and the laughs. Headley mentions the Nakba there. You're talking rubbish. You're talking rubbish, the Nakba. Translation, we have no idea what you're talking about. The biggest problem in media isn't dealing with people who don't know the facts. That happens. These guys don't know that they don't know. They don't want to know the facts. They have no capacity for critical reflection of how they might be wrong. So what precisely are they adding to their audience? Where's the value? Open question. Anyway, let's see how this ends.
Hamas didn't exist in 1947 when you started occupying their land. Hamas didn't exist. We have Netanyahu making the same statements about Hamas that he did about the PLO.
They're very similar. Very, very similar. Same thing. Terrorists.
Oh, really?
Same thing.
Yeah. Your state's a terrorist state, isn't it, Ash? That's the reality.
No.
Britain's a terrorist state. America's a terrorist state. And Israel is a terrorist state. This is the reality of it. Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Well, it's not a terrorist state, is it?
It's a terrorist state. Right, James, you're trying to assault me, James. You're trying to assault me, James.
I'm an old man with cancer.
Well, James, don't please.
Well, do what I ask and go.
I'm not going to go. And you won't be able to remove me, James, so please don't.
Why? What are you going to do?
I'm making a statement. I'm making a statement here for Palestine.
A statement of rubbish. She's talking rubbish.
Take your book and go out and support Palestine. I know you want to hit me.
I'm not going to hit you,
no,
James.
You're not. You're absolutely right.
Not at all.
You equate Hamas with Israel.
You're a silly little man.
Well,
you're a silly little man.
A
genocide enabler. A genocide enabler, James.
You talk crap. That's
all you can spout.
All you can spout is that crap, isn't it? Genocide.
From the river to the sea.
Well, you can certainly see why their ratings aren't the best over at TalkTV. And why invite the guy on if you don't like what he's got to say, to the point he's escorted off air? Mike, besides the politics of what's being discussed, this thing looked ridiculous, amateurish. Some people might be saying, well, why share it then? Why talk about it? It matters because actually this is a media product owned by Rupert Murdoch, and that's probably the most influential person in British public life and politics over the last 40, 50 years.
Absolutely. We know how influential kind of Murdoch has been in recent years, and this is one of his products. Like, I found there's so much to unpick there, Aaron. Honestly, it's unbelievable, the behaviour. The line at the end, we says, I know you want to hit me as well. Just baffling. I think this does speak to the liberal consensus on Palestine, right, and on Israel. So when it comes to Israel, right, you must critique Israel according to the liberal consensus with the caveat of, Israel has the right to defend itself, So there must be that caveat, or you must use the most evasive and passive language possible. That's what most of these kind of liberal commentariats wants, right? To be fair, that's not really liberal commentary anyway. That's like kind of right-wing commentary, but you get my point. So I think that's what people want on Israel, right? And what's funny is TalkTV have had some of the most kind of right-wing thinkers go on there and talk about pro-Palestinian protesters in the most emphatic and apocalyptic terms possible. You know, the idea that these people are enemies of the country and we need to defend the country against these people. Whenever I've gone to the protests, I'm seeing kind of this really lovely coalition of people, whether it's environmentalists or lecturers or just teachers, ordinary people, people from the Labour Party, people from the Green Party, people from all walks of life, Christians, Muslims, Jews, are attending these protests because they care deeply what's happening in Gaza. Yet on Talk TV, you can have a guy go on there and say, these are enemies to the nation. We must defend the nation against them. Talking almost in terms of unit power. The idea these people have come to our country and are now raising this Islamist views that needs to be tackled. So I think that's the bigger issue here. That's why this story is important, right? Because we need to push back against the idea that the pro-Palestine movement is evil and any critique of Israel is also evil. These two things aren't true. Israel can be criticized, and also the pro-Palestinian movement is not this evil Islamist movement that's trying to take over Britain. We're raising genuine concerns for those in Gaza. I think on a Talk TV point of view, it's just amateurish. It's absolutely amateurish. And I think the biggest problem for me is, you're having a left-wing guy come onto your show. The conversation might eventually end up on the issue of Gaza. You generally know what a left-wing person is going to say on Gaza. If that offends you, why bring that person on in the first place? It's genuinely bizarre. And I think what's funny is the kind of right pretend to be these free speech defenders. We defend free speech against the woke left and the wokies. But yet when someone says anything vaguely against their kind of stance or standpoints, that person must be ushered out of the studio in this kind of ridiculous manner. So I think they haven't covered themselves in glory, but I think the bigger picture here for us is the kind of liberal consensus, the kind of general consensus on how we can and can't talk about Israel. And it's something we need to push back against quite firmly, I think.
There's two things I want to say in response to that. The first is, I think you're absolutely right. The reason why the right-wing press has really had a default setting of just anger, vitriol, stupidity often, but it's emotions over facts, right? It is because they don't have the facts. On this issue, they do not have the facts on their side. Now, I'm not saying Steve Headley was bringing facts, Barnaby Raines style, but they couldn't have a sensible conversation based upon historical fact. He talks about the foundation of the State of Israel. He talks about the Nakba. They literally don't know what he's talking about. So they need to talk about things like 7-7. Why are you siding with the enemies of this country? Palestine's not done anything to this country. By the way, the Haganah, prior to the formation of the State of Israel's Zionist terrorist group, they were responsible for bombing the King David Hotel in the 1940s. I think over 20 UK nationals died. They hanged two British service personnel who were conscripts around the same time. This was far-right Zionist terrorists. So you say, well, do you condemn terrorism? Of course. Do you condemn the Zionist terrorism, which, by the way, was being acted on, led by some of the people like Menachem Begin, who became literally the most senior politicians in Israeli public life? Do you condemn them? But they don't even know this stuff. They don't know any of it. They're completely ignorant. Now, that's why we're here at Novara Media. We're here to talk about the facts, talk about context, talk in a serious tone about serious issues. But I think this is really, really key. The reason why they chucked him out, in short, is because they can't have that conversation. They're unable to have that conversation. And then secondly, look, on the left, we like to talk about, the big bad wolf of the right. They've got the billionaires on their side. They're incredibly powerful. But look, guys, this is a shambles. These people are a joke. Not all of them, many of them. And the idea that the left can't build a counterpoint to something as ridiculous as James Whale and Talk TV, I kind of find hard to believe. It's going to take a long time, but we'll get there. And like I say, it's that little bit easier when you have the facts on your side.